Here we go, Kane, and we're going to jump in quickly. There's a bit of an underappreciated theme as that we started before 7 that comes through my buck stops here. The first port of call for me is the Adelaide Football Club. It's their forward line that I want to focus on, and the fact that they could well be asking the most of opposition defences and be as big a headache as any team doing the rounds at the moment. But Matty Nicks was wrapped with what he saw. Adelaide are probably the best side I've seen this year at going from the inside to the outside. They play with great intensity. They're very clean and they're very hard.
Just
for the little circle.
For someone listening, and they say, "What do you mean by going from the inside to the outside?"
Well, when you wonder how a team can create such fast offense, it's generally off the back of the basics done really well inside. So cleaner and harder inside. So if there's a 2-on-2 or there's a 3-on-3 or a clearance or a stoppage, some sides can find the ball in the hands of their teammates with time and space within 3 or 4 handballs or 3 or 4 touches. Others just cannot. So that's being cleaner and harder inside, and that's what Adelaide are doing especially well. I thought, Sloan, Laird back in the side. Sloan is playing his best football for quite a bit of time. And outside of that, they don't have a lot of experienced, sort of hard-nosed AFL players over a long period of time. But what they do have is class. Taylor Walker and Fogarty and Thilthorpe up front are providing aerial power. Rankin is obviously a dangerous player at ground level. Murphy's the up and back runner. Pedler can do it in the air and on the ground. Rochelle plays through the midfield and goes forward. Keys can run with and then run the other way.
Good balance, isn't it?
Jones is standing up and getting the job done. That's without mentioning a Scholl who's playing off the wing. There's so many ways that they can hurt you. The ruckman can slide forward, but at the moment, Adelaide are going to ask a question.
No doubt.
Of a lot of sides, and they're doing particularly well. Second one for me is a bit of a mea culpa, actually. It's about Tom Mitchell, who is a player who I reckon I need to give a little bit more love to. He's doing a lot better than I thought that he was going to be capable of. But Collingwood, another great win on the weekend, and the coach was happy. Their best is obviously as good as anyone in the competition. So to be able to focus on the next opportunity is what we're seeing. And we're seeing plenty of players come through Collingwood's side and get it done. But Tom Mitchell was the one that I wanted to focus on. A change of environment, fresh eyes, new coaches to impress, new players to impress. We know that he's a quality football product. Hawthorn had got to the point where they felt, and he'd probably got to the point at Hawthorn where they were both stale with each other. But this freshness has been great for him. We're seeing his best attributes come to the fore. I didn't think that he and Tay Adams would play in the same midfield for much, and Tay played a lot of high forward yesterday. But together they've been able to stiffen up a really solid Collingwood midfield. When you've got Chris, Dacos, Noble, Quainer, even De Goey, who are running past the contest at pace, Tom Mitchell's ability to be clean inside and find those players helps Collingwood break the lines, and his consistent sort of clearance and even his tackle pressure on the weekend was better than I've seen it for a long time also. So Tom Mitchell's been
I think I got that one wrong too. I didn't think he would be this influential for Collingwood. Is it something about the teams that improved their lists in the off-season versus those that didn't? I look at Sydney and you go, I didn't see not capitulation, but I didn't see this season coming from Sydney. I thought they had a squad that was on the right trajectory, but in the off-season they did nothing really. They didn't. Whereas Melbourne add to your list, Brisbane add to your list, Port Adelaide go and add to your list, Collingwood go and add and strengthen up your list. You've got to be moving and improving at the end of every off-season.
You do, but Sydney have always been a side that have backed what they've got, and they do have quite a young squad. So I think the other thing it shows is just how important the emotional aspect of the game is, and that belief in yourself, and that takes me to the third one today. I mean, I want to talk about Richmond. I want to talk about Damien Hardwick. What a great result that was for Richmond, but just even Hardwick's demeanour over the last 5 weeks, 5 losses, and then I think the way he carries himself and his expectations of that group gave them the capacity to be able to have that performance and that win against Geelong. In the last 5 weeks, he's been combative. He's been humorous at times, and he's been able to maintain his humour. He's maintained his energy. He's had questions asked about his long-term tenure, about his commitment to the club, about whether he needs to look elsewhere. And it's only 1 week, but I just think this result is only 1 week. But I think that it's a product of the coach's demeanour, his attitude, his combativeness. I just think that he's been amazing. In a situation where there's plenty of different ways you can go about communicating your message for the club and for the team, or handle the questions that come from the media. And I just think that he's been first class. Their back seven is Jaden Shaw coming back in the side has definitely helped Daniel Rioli. They've got some real toughness there with Baker and Vlosten and Grimes. And when they're really solid, their back seven. Well, then their youth.
Are you a believer in the Tigers?
For this year?
Yeah.
They can't win the flag this year.
No, can they make the 8?
Yeah, they can. They could. And I think last week I said, it's not going to be their year. They haven't been able to get there, and that's from making finals. But they could. They could definitely. We wouldn't have thought they were going to win a game against Geelong. And you talk about inequities in draw and whatever. Richmond will be in that middle 6 in that area, so they'll probably get some advantage from that. But they lost contested ball. They lost inside 50s. Brought on Cameron was fantastic. Dusty's played one of his better games. He's been almost and got there. And your man Trent Cotchin kicked 3 goals and got in the major. So that's taking him for 4 for the season. Still a long way from the 25 that you need to worry about.
I revised it to 15 though.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. So
another couple of bags.
I started at 25. We should have a buddy bet on that one. I reckon I started at 25 and then revised it to 15, and now he's got 4.
We'll definitely get it.
I'm safe still.
The next one I want to look at is Carlton, and I'm going to touch on the coach's attitude here in some shape or form, and maybe Vossi can learn something from the way Dimmer has handled the last 5 weeks. But it's been a tough little stretch for Carlton at the moment, and I know a lot of Carlton fans hear that and they're not satisfied.
No.
Because their expectations are greater than just having moments, even against a side like the Bulldogs, who have played some fantastic football since their round 2, or since after round 2, where they didn't start the season particularly well. I reckon Vossi needs to remember who he is.
What are you saying?
I'm really wary of making judgments as a media person.
No,
from
I understand
the outside
that, but that's your job.
What I see on the outside is Vossi is one of the most competitive individuals that I've ever faced in the game. I've been where he is, and you get locked up thinking that you need to say a certain thing for a certain group of people at a certain time, and I'm really conscious that he's aware of not wanting to throw his players under the bus, because you need to maintain the relationship with your players. But there still is a balance that you need to reach around challenge and just calling it for what it is and saying what it is, and that is that they are not playing well enough.
Yep.
The players are not emptying out. We're not seeing the energy that we expect. We're not seeing Harry Mackay is a gun. But we are not seeing him maximise his opportunities. You're paid to take marks and kick goals, mate. You're paid to consistently compete. Now, he's been a 7 out of 10, but 7 out of 10 gets you in and out, doesn't get you enough nourishment. So I think Vossi's got to remember who he is, and he's a competitor, and don't be afraid to show that in your presses. Don't be afraid to be a little bit out of control, to be a little bit emotional, because I know that's the way he carried himself. That's the way he was a great skipper. That's the way he was a great leader. And I think that's what Carlton need right now, and he's got it.
And I think that's what the Carlton fans want to hear. They want to hear we had moments that looked more like us, and there were little bits of pieces that we liked, and it was more of a game that we had. But Carlton fans want that. And I'll ask the question, 1300 736 736. Bucks is saying, Michael Voss, don't be afraid to say what you really think after the game. Would you rather hear that more so than what you got on the weekend? 1300 736 736.
We'll touch the last one. That's another guy that I reckon needs more love, and that's Tom Liberatore. I just love the way that he goes about footy. I love the way that he views life. It's a little bit quirky. It's a
Mm.
little bit left field, and I love that character coming out of him. But his consistency this year's been first class, and he stood up when the game was on the line. And Cripps really lifted in the last quarter, but Liberatore's performance was huge. 16,
13 clearances.
yeah, 13 clearances. But he's averaged 7 clearances and averaged 7 tackles over the course of the season, and he finds a way. He's clean. He's hard inside. I just think he's a heart and soul type player. I imagine if you had a teammate like Tom Liberatore, you know exactly what you're going to get. That consistency of effort and of attitude, and to do it the way that he does it. He puts his head over the ball and puts his head in the trough flat out. With Bontempelli around him and some of the stars, I just love the way that he goes about it, and wanted to give a shout out to Tom.
A lot of text coming through on the back of your comments on Carlton. Great commentary on Vossi Bucks. Love to see that competitive come out, and I'm a Carlton supporter, says Matt. Absolutely, we do want that. What is nourishment? We don't go to the footy to be nourished. Carlton fans don't even know what us looks like. Spot on, Bucks. Get angry and show us.
It's a balance. It's not, going off your head and losing your chops in a press conference is.
No, you didn't say that.
It's
You
not.
said
No, it's not going to be the answer. But
to-
I think from experience for me, I've been in that position where you're sort of locked up, where the side isn't performing as well as you'd like to, and you go into a presser quite measured because you know that you haven't met expectations. And when it happens over a longer period of time, I thought the contrast between Damien Hardwick, now he's got a couple of premierships as cachet. I don't know if that shouldn't change who you are in this moment with this group. But Richmond's expectations were a lot lower than Carlton's going into this. Externally, I think most would have thought that Carlton were going to have a better year than Richmond, and that's a sweeping statement, but I would suspect that would have been the case. So maybe Vossi's feeling a little bit more pressure or expectation, but I don't think it's a coaching issue with Carlton. It's across the board. Their players, their leaders.
How can you say it's not a coaching issue? They had 29 entries for 1 goal in the first half. Surely that is something structurally is flawed about the way that they're moving the footy to be that inefficient.
There was no problem with moving the footy to get it in 29 times. There was a problem with the last kick. There was a problem with the execution of the individuals that had the ball. There was a problem with the contest on the other side of it. They only went inside 21 or 22 times in the second half, and they started kicking goals. So
there's the number of times you go in, but there's the quality of entry. A lot of them were slow and wide going in, which is easy to defend. Whereas in the second half, it was more chaotic, more frenetic, took a few more risks, faster ball movement.
There is, and I think
you wonder why that doesn't happen from the start.
No, I think what that shows is the contrast. So they got more supply, less output, less supply, more output in the second half. I thought that, we talk about system, you talk about process. I thought Carlton sort of flipped it upside down. Their forward structure changed a little bit. It changed a lot. Their talls went up higher and smalls went a little bit deeper. And I don't think they didn't play consistently at all across. There was Western Bulldogs had a plan that they executed, and for right or wrong, they looked like they had a structure to their game across 4 quarters. Carlton looked like it after half time.
So is that not coaching though?
They changed it. Well, yeah, it is coaching because you're looking for the answers to the balance that you haven't been able to find throughout the early part of the year. You got to remember that they were 3.5 wins from the first 4 games, but they weren't hitting it out of the park.
No.
And they're still looking for the balance. They're looking that they need to change things up. Doherty going back to halfback's the answer because he provides structure, and Sard really provides pop going off the back of that. You've got to get potentially Walsh in the midfield in some way, whether it's as a high forward or as a legitimate mid. Put Kennedy.
Do
Hewitt,
they have
Cripps.
Bucks the talent? Like, so all the names you mentioned, good, honest players. But how many of the Blues players are you frightened when they've got the footy? Do they have the hurt factor with their lineup? I mean, you've spoken about Adelaide. One of the biggest improvements of that team is their ball use and the talent that they've been able to get in that team. They have players that genuinely hurt you now. Rankin hurts you, Walker hurts you, Rochelle hurts you, Dawson hurts you, Saligo hurts you with the footy, Smith hurts you off half back. Who is that for Carlton? Who hurts you with the footy? Sard hurts you. Yep. I reckon Curno's a great kick and hurts you if you've got it outside 50. He does. Walsh probably, and I thought some of his ball use was excellent on Saturday night. Who else is there? Have they got the cattle?
Not in terms of that. I think that their DNA is contests, both on the ground and in the air. It's not pretty outside footy hurt factor that you're talking about. They haven't been able to, and they know as a team and believe as a unit that their game is built off contests. They're not getting enough of a contest in front of the ball at the moment. They're big units, and Curno's kicked a lot of goals. Mackay's got a lot of contests. They're not providing consistent contests. They had 4 or 5 entries where the ball went within 3 or 4 metres of Charlie Curnow, and I think that he needed to close the distance to get there. You're not going to get a free run at every contest, but you've got to compete. Like Aaron Norton at the other end of the field. Now he didn't have it. He didn't have an exceptional game, and he looked really good early, hit the post a couple of times, 1-2 from 3 shots in the first quarter. But he will consistently launch and throw himself at the aerial ball. And when you've got a player that does that in front of the ball, well, then your ground level players come and grow off the back of that. Carlton have lost that.
So Mackay and Curnow aren't competitive enough?
I don't think so. They used to go to Curnow, Mackay and De Koning or Pitney early in the last year, and they were criticised for having too many aerial targets in one spot. I reckon they did it once on the weekend where Curnow and Mackay were in the same contest about 20 metres out from goal. Now, they didn't score from it, but if you actually have a look at the still shot of that, the space that there is at ground level when all of the aerial players, all the Western Bulldogs defenders were drawn to that contest, and there looked like there was greater space at ground level. You keep providing that opportunity for Owies, for Durden, for Motlop, for Walsh, who's coming back in, for Cripps, who's got to find himself more forward of the contest. And you're going to find out, you're going to get the Carlton that you got through most of last year when they were playing their best footy. And I reckon they've tried to be a little too pretty. Just kick it to contest, and that's where you do your best work.
Who does the result say more about as we work through all of the 9 games? We'll start on Friday night. I know you were really complimentary of Richmond, Bucks.
Yeah, look, I thought it did say something about their pluck. It said something about their positivity and their fight. They talk about raising the fight flat out. They went in with another young team with a couple of troops back in Nathan Broad, who did a fantastic role on Jeremy Cameron. But the other part that they were playing for was Dion Prestia, they're very good at celebrating their own, at putting certain people on a pedestal in regards to their contribution to team and to club and the sacrifice that they made. And Prestia is one of those. So for them to be able to get up for that game against, Geelong have been very good, but they look flat. But Richmond took full toll and deserved the win. What about the Battle of the Coasters, the West and the Gold?
Yeah, I'm a bit sick of talking about West Coast and North Melbourne, and does the result say anything about the teams that play against them? It's hard to find one. What I did love from Gold Coast was a couple of they're not the young players anymore, but those 4th and 5th type year players that are starting to burst out and come into their own. And I speak of Rao, who I've observed his career really closely, and how unique he is in the way that he plays his footy and how contested him. He's the most physical midfielder that we have in the game. If he can start to explore avenues to get some easier ball, then he's going to really come into his own in this competition. He did that on Friday night, got outside of the contest, still got your clearances, your 17 tackles, but was able to drive the ball inside 50 from outside of the stoppage, which was great and good to see. Noah Anderson got tagged, but still performed really well. Lukosius had a really good game, and King is sort of getting back to his best form. So I think for me it was Gold Coast, Sydney and Fremantle, the Dockers with a much needed win.
Oof. I'm having a bit each way here. It says a bit about Sydney. Like it really does say a bit about Sydney and the fact that they're in a funk at the moment.
Yeah.
And their game revolves around pressure and contest, and they're just not getting that high intensity pressure and contest consistently. The opposition looked a lot better, and I think the smaller ground helped them, but their offense looked really damaging when they get their small forward. And we talk about this for every side, but when their small forwards get to work, and I'm talking about Switkowski, Schultz, and Frederick, namely, the contest they get from a Banfield. Amos has been excellent. He's missed a few shots on goal, and he can work on his momentum into his set shots. But and Tracy comes in as a competitor, and Jackson's played a few good weeks. So I think, they would be emboldened by the fact that they were able to come back from a pretty good Sydney start to be able to finish that contest and take the win on enemy soil, which we haven't seen the Dockers do too much recently. So
got a hold of them from centre bounce. John Longmire just spoke with real frustration after the game. He spoke of Vossi's comments. He just said, I haven't seen numbers as bad as that from centre bounce and clearance and midfield perspective from us for really ever.
Well, Callum Mills went down, but they've got some depth there in some 3-4 year players that are hard nosed that are known to be able to put their head in the trough and to be able to win that contested ball. Can't be always on Luke Parker. So they need to improve on that. North Melbourne and Port Power down in Hobart.
Yeah, it was the same for North. 3 weeks ago highlighted some of their lack of effort against Melbourne in the first 3 minutes of the game, which is unexplainable really for me, and that hasn't improved. So we're not talking skill, we're not talking game plan, we're talking fundamental effort that North Melbourne refused to bring each and every week, and that was the case again for them. But I want to go just a different way. Said more about Port Adelaide, but it says to me Port Adelaide they're not a top 4 contender for me. From here, it would be a really good result to win a final. So they play Melbourne on Friday night, and I'm looking at Bryn Teakle going up against Grundy and Gawn, and he's going to get monstered. I'm looking at the key defensive players for Port Adelaide being undersized, and it's going to be Van Rooyen, it's going to be one of Grundy or Gawn in the forward line. So that just the lack of personnel weapons that Port have, I think in the end is going to expose them. Now, they didn't have Dixon, they didn't have Rioli, Burne-Jones came out late, Todd Marshall got concussed early in the game. So they had probably 4 of their best 12 players not out of that, out of the side. So
I think
that's
Dixon,
an issue for them.
I think. Well, I mean, when you need to flip Ryan Burton forward, and he did pretty well, and Bonner, who's been a halfback for a long time, and he's asked to sort of play a role at forward. They were able to manufacture a really good result.
14 goal kickers, though.
I think their attitude to the contest, Port Adelaide, has been as good as any. And I think they'll give a great account of themselves next week. And whilst you've got that pluck and that endeavour and that attitude, you can. I
think that only gets you so far.
I
and
agree.
I'm with you. And
I agree.
That's been so impressive. Under pressure, Ken Healy's coach has been terrific. The leadership of the group, the young Rosie and Butters have been just sensational. But I think that only gets you so far.
I agreed. But it can take you a long way. Take you a long way. And it can also buffer those times when you don't have the first choice players that you would like to. Charlie Dixon's a massive shift to the way that side comes together and plays, and they were able to buffer that for the first time for a while.
It's yours.
Yeah, so I've got Hawthorn and Melbourne. Look, it's much the same as West Coast, playing West Coast and North. What does it actually really tell you about your side? But Hawthorn have played some pretty good footy, so it just reinforces where Melbourne are at. So I think it says more about them. They shared the load in terms of their goal kicking. They don't rely on just one guy. So. Bailey Fritsch pops up, 2 to both he and Petty and Spargo. Chandler keeps, getting in and around. Their mix looks really balanced and even. They're still finding, young players that are coming up and doing well. McVee's done really well. Rivers, who's starting to get a little bit of focus. Bowie, who I reckon in the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks has come back and looked really good off halfback. And that's not even mentioning their stars. So Melbourne are just tracking along well. They needed to tick that box and then on to the next. Brisbane Essendon.
Brisbane, they're right in the conversation now. Still got 7 games left at the Gabba. They've won 6 in a row. They play Gold Coast at the Gabba this week before Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. Then it's Hawthorn and Sydney who are struggling. So they're top 2 at the end of the year. Very difficult to see them not making a grand final from top 2 if they finish in that position. I understand there's competition for those top 2 spots, but how vital is that for interstate sides, particularly when you've got a record like theirs at the Gabba? If they get themselves in that position for the finals, I mean, it's difficult to see them early days, and there's still some questions over how some of their players stand up in finals and big games, but they couldn't be in a better position after starting 1 and 2 and some real pressure coming on to that side at the start of the year. So he's coached well. Fags, they've got so much talent in that side, and I think some of their leaders, including Andrews and Neil, are just leading that club exceptionally well and flying under the radar a little bit. Brisbane, they're going to be right there. Carlton and the Bulldogs we've spoken about a lot this morning.
Yeah, look, it said plenty about the Bulldogs for me. I think they've found that structure. They've found some balance in their 22-23 that they didn't have in the first couple of rounds. Bontempelli has been huge for the majority of the season, but I feel like and English is the other one as well, and they were winning games when they were performing and competing. It was off the back of those 2 players in particular. But I just think that they just look more solid now. Liam Jones is settled. He's established. He had that concussion in round 1 and that hard knock in round 1, and he's been able to come back. He's closing off a lot of opposition. Forward thrust.
Ugle-Hagen's a good player.
Ugle-Hagen,
isn't he a good player?
He doesn't have to get much of the ball to have an impact.
I know.
And he actually dropped 3 or 4 marks and a few ground level balls where if he was clean, he either would have kicked a goal or given one off. So he's probably 5 or 6 moments in a game, little half chances that I reckon will come that he will get eventually, and that's when we'll see him ultimately pop from what is a really good, solid contributor and danger now to someone who's got more hurt factor. But I do like the way that he's built his career, the way that Bulldogs have supported him, and obviously out of 7, my love for Tom Liberatore is established. I thought that he was brilliant. Adelaide and St Kilda
could go either way here. I've been a real admirer of Adelaide even before the season started. So to kick 121 points, I think it was, against a side that is supposed to be good defensively was a real standout. And their ball movement and method. So you've spoken about their method around the contest, but also outside of that and the way that they transition the ball and a couple of their D50 transition goals were a highlight. But have St Kilda been worked out is what I want to ask. I mean, the Port Adelaide game on the Friday night where Port went a little bit quicker with their ball movement and exposed the Saints one-on-one defenders in one-on-one contests where the other defender didn't have the opportunity to come on as the third man up. If you match them at the contest and around the ball and you move the ball a little bit quicker, just think the shine is wearing off the Saints. They're in danger. They're in danger of missing the 8, even though they started so strongly. So watch that one with interest. And the last game was the red-hot Collingwood Magpies taking on the Giants Bucks.
Yeah, I think it's clearly Collingwood. The contribution they're getting across the board has been first class. Mason Cox has played mainly as a second ruck and forward, and has now been asked to play as a primary ruckman, and was probably played one of his most consistent four-quarter games. Like, he's played a couple of big games in finals, but that was his most consistent four-quarter effort, and that was excellent. We've spoken about Mitchell coming into that side. Bobby Hill's made a difference. Markov off the back, his run and dash with Noble and Quainer and Dacos, who had another 40 touches. So De Goey's having a career season, and his last 3 or 4 years have been as consistent as at any time. I mean, outside of the off-field focus, his actual football, his contribution to team is as consistent as it's ever been, and he's put 3 or 4 really good seasons together. I haven't even mentioned Pendlebury or Sidebottom or Darcy Moore. They're Crisp
Maynard.
These guys are standing
They're
up.
everywhere.
Yeah, and you've got young blokes that have come out and playing really important roles as well, and just playing their part. McCreary and Ginnivan forward.
Hill. They're everywhere,
Yeah,
Bucks.
look,
They are everywhere.
And Hoskin Elliott.
Yep.
So look, it's just a really good team performance. This is what it looks like when you are maximising your strengths. This is what it looks like when you are playing without any inhibition. When you're really confident that you're going to get that nourishment and rewarded for any work that you do, and that you're a part of something special, because that's what we all want to be a part of. So when great teams start coming together, and you get the most out of everyone, it's an exciting journey to be on.